They told us space was empty, silent, predictable. They lied. The first time I saw the MIR-13 station hanging in orbit, I knew something about it was wrong. Not broken or decayed like the relics we usually salvage. Wrong in the way a mannequin looks human until you stare too long at its glassy eyes. It was 2026, late winter. I had been contracted by a private aerospace outfit funded by a Russian billionaire. He wanted our small crew to investigate an object NORAD claimed didn't exist. It looked Soviet. It had the designation MIR-13 stenciled across its hull. And yet, no record anywhere suggested it had ever been launched. According to every official log, MIR-12 was the last of that line. So what the hell was this thing doing here, circling Earth like a ghost? Our ship, the Peregrine, drifted closer. I pressed my helmet against the small observation dome, watching the black silhouette of the station grow larger against the curve of the planet. My gut churned. Too pristine. Its hull gleamed with reflected sunlight, clean of micrometeorite scars or burn marks. It didn't look like something that had been orbiting for decades. It looked new, like it had been placed there yesterday. Sergei, I muttered into comms. This doesn't make sense. Where's the where? Where's the degradation? The pilot's gravelly voice filled my headset. Don't ask questions you don't want answers to. We're paid to get inside, catalogue, and get out. Beside me, Lena's nervous breath hissed through her mic. She was the youngest of us, barely 30, hired for her skill with outdated Russian systems. My professors told me MIR-13 was cancelled before it left the drawing board, she whispered. There shouldn't be anything here. From the back, Miller, an American contractor with a laugh that usually grated, said, Well, congratulations, Lena. You're about to rewrite the textbooks. But none of us laughed. As we approached docking range, a faint ripple of light passed across one of the station's windows. At first, I thought it was a reflection. Then another flicker followed, deeper inside, like a corridor light stuttering awake. My skin tightened inside the suit. No one had been here for decades, and yet the place still had power. Docking clamps extended, their mechanical arms reaching for the station. Metal kissed metal, and a faint thud reverberated through our craft. I stared through the porthole, heart hammering. The station's exterior wasn't just gleaming. It was alive with something I hadn't noticed before. Frost. Or what looked like frost. Pale veins spread across the hull, glistening in the sunlight. At first glance, it seemed ordinary. Condensation frozen in vacuum. But then it pulsed, just barely, like a slow heartbeat. Jesus Christ. Miller's voice cracked. Tell me you saw that. I saw it, I said flatly. Sergei's silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd frozen up. Then he exhaled sharply. Get your head straight. It's probably electrical discharge, nothing more. No one believed that. Not really. We cycled through the airlock, magnetic boots clamping against the old Soviet steel. Inside, my visor lights cut through dustless corridors. That was the first thing that unnerved me. No dust. I'd been on derelicts before, abandoned modules, forgotten satellites. There was always residue, flakes of paint, drifting bits of human debris. But here, nothing. It was as if the place had been sealed moments before our arrival. The walls gleamed faintly with the same crystalline sheen I'd seen outside. Up close, it was worse. The frost wasn't frost at all. It formed branching patterns, delicate as veins beneath skin, pulsing with a faint bluish glow when my light lingered too long. Air composition is stable, Lena murmured after scanning her instruments. Oxygen levels consistent with Earth norm. That's impossible. Nothing about this is possible, I muttered. We passed the crew quarters, bunks neatly arranged, straps dangling as if waiting for absent cosmonauts. I ran my glove across one of the tabletops. No dust, no mold, no decay. My helmet lights caught something wedged under a strap, an old logbook bound in worn leather. I flipped it open carefully. The handwriting was Cyrillic, but the date stopped me cold. 2034. I froze, staring at the page. My breath fogged the inside of my visor. This is a mistake. What's the problem? Sergei asked, turning. I shoved the book toward his visor. His eyes widened. He didn't argue. None of us did. The silence stretched long, broken only by the low hum of the station's ancient systems still running against all odds. Miller muttered, "Maybe it's a joke. Some collector planted it here, like a stunt." But his voice wavered. He didn't believe himself. We pressed deeper. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the soles of my boots. We turned a corner into the operations module, where a row of old monitors flickered dimly. Static danced across the screens, then resolved into looping footage. 4 cosmonauts, floating calmly as they performed maintenance routines. The footage repeated every few minutes. At first, nothing seemed odd. Then, in the third loop, I noticed it. Behind them, a shape, black, segmented, too tall for a man, gliding soundlessly in 0G. None of the cosmonauts reacted. They didn't even turn their heads. My stomach dropped. I rewound it again and again. Each time the shape appeared at the edge of the frame, inching closer. Each time, my chest tightened until it was hard to breathe. Lena whimpered softly. "It's not possible. It can't be." The lights above us flickered. The hum deepened, rising in pitch until the walls seemed to vibrate. I turned sharply, certain I'd heard something. A clang, distant but sharp, echoing down the corridor behind us. Miller lifted his weapon instinctively, though we all knew bullets wouldn't mean much in pressurized steel. "Tell me that was thermal expansion," he muttered. No one answered. We walked carefully toward the sound, every breath loud inside our helmets. The corridor ended in another junction, empty, silent. But the frost along the walls bore marks, imprints, boot prints pressed into the crystalline surface. Fresh. Too fresh. Like someone had walked there only minutes before. My throat tightened as I stared at the trail leading deeper into the station. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to leave. But behind us, the docking clamps had already locked tight. And something told me they weren't going to let go. The trail of fresh prints in the crystalline frost pulled us deeper into the station. Each step forward felt heavier, though gravity should have been nearly absent here. My suit's readouts jittered, flickering between stable and fluctuating. It was as if the laws of physics were being bent, tugged by something unseen within the hull. "Stay close," Sergei ordered, his voice firm but tense. His hand hovered near the emergency cutter on his belt, though I doubted it would help if the shadow from the footage decided to step into the corridor. Lena's breaths quickened through the comms. Those boot marks, they look recent, but they can't be. Miller chuckled nervously. "Maybe we've got squatters in orbit. Ghost squatters." His laugh cracked halfway, failing to mask the tremor in his tone. We followed the trail until it ended abruptly, at a hatch sealed with a heavy lever. The metal surface bore scratches, as though someone had clawed at it from the inside. Frost veins pulsed faintly across the door, as if alive, slowly crawling outward. "Leave it," Sergei muttered. "We'll map the rest first." But before we could retreat, the overhead lights brightened and dimmed in an unnatural rhythm, almost like breathing. The hum we'd heard earlier deepened into a low vibration that rattled in my chest. Somewhere ahead, a dull clang resonated again. Not thermal expansion this time. Deliberate, heavy, measured. We pulled back into the main module, our boots scraping faintly on the metal floor. The central hub offered some sense of order with its neatly arranged panels, though the equipment didn't look quite right. Control boards that should have matched 1980s design gleamed with components too advanced for that era. Sleeker interfaces, strange switches, subtle details that didn't belong. It was like staring at a forgery that grew more convincing the longer you looked, until your eyes caught a single detail that broke the illusion. Lena crouched near a console, her gloved fingers running over the Cyrillic labels. This is years ahead of what they should have had. Even the shielding looks experimental. She hesitated, then added, "And some of these markings aren't Russian." I leaned closer. Faded stencils on the underside of one panel bore English words, and a NASA insignia so faint I almost missed it. My mouth went dry. This wasn't just Soviet tech, Sergei swore under his breath. If this is true, it means they worked together. They built this, and then buried it. The realization left a cold weight pressing on my ribs. Whatever mrCreepypasta was, it had been erased from history on purpose. Someone wanted it forgotten. We moved cautiously toward the crew lounge. Chairs bolted to the floor floated gently in the airless quiet. Personal effects were still strapped down, undisturbed. Photos taped to bulkheads fluttered in the draft from our suits. Families, smiling faces, people who had supposedly never been here. Then, from the far wall, a soft flicker drew my eyes. Another monitor had come to life, its screen fractured by static. The looped footage played again. 4 cosmonauts working calmly, until the shadow returned. Only this time, it moved differently. It turned its head, slowly, toward the camera. I felt my pulse hammering as the figure's elongated body shifted closer. Its movements were too smooth, like an insect gliding underwater. The loop reset, but I couldn't shake the image. Those blank features staring into the lens as though they knew we'd be watching decades later. "Turn it off," Miller snapped, voice tight. "I don't want to see that thing again." Lena's hand hovered over the controls, but she didn't move. Her eyes stayed glued to the screen. It wasn't there the first time. It's different now. Before any of us could argue, a sharp metallic bang echoed through the ducting above us. Dustless pipes rattled. The sound traveled through the walls like something crawling inside. My throat tightened as I tilted my light upward. Nothing. Just bare steel. We pressed onward, deeper into the science wing. The crystalline growth thickened here, coating the walls in a web-like film. My visor fogged briefly, and I realized the temperature had dropped. Each breath carried a bite of metallic cold. My boots left faint imprints in the frost that immediately began to fill themselves in, as though the material was alive and healing. At the end of the corridor stood a chamber sealed by a reinforced door. The frost was thickest here, writhing almost imperceptibly across the metal surface. We tried the wheel, but it was welded tight. Even Sergei's strength couldn't budge it. "That door," Lena whispered. "It was locked from the inside." The words chilled me more than the frost ever could. Someone, or something, had gone in and made sure nothing came out. Before I could respond, the floor vibrated. Subtle at first, then harder. Our suit sensors chimed with erratic readings. Gravity fluctuations, tiny surges pulling us in uneven directions. My stomach lurched. The instruments showed microbursts of force, impossible ones. Miller's voice cracked in my headset. "What the hell is doing that?" None of us had an answer. We stood frozen in the cold corridor, staring at that sealed lab door, while the unseen heartbeat of the station pulsed all around us. They say silence is harmless, just empty air between words. But in mrCreepypasta, silence carried weight, pressing down until it felt like my helmet might crack under it. We stood frozen in that corridor, staring at the boot prints etched into the glowing frost. They weren't faded, they weren't distorted by time. They were sharp, crisp. Whoever had left them could have been around the next corner. Sergei raised a gloved hand, signaling us forward. His movements were steady, but I caught the subtle tremor in his wrist. Miller muttered a curse under his breath. Lena's breathing grew uneven in my headset, but she kept walking. Her scanner clutched against her chest like a talisman. Each step echoed faintly, as though the station had a hollow cavity beneath its skin. The crystalline veins along the walls pulsed softly, guiding us like luminous arteries. When Lena passed her light over them, I could have sworn the glow shifted to follow her, like an eye narrowing in recognition. We reached a sealed hatch, its wheel frozen mid-turn. The boot print stopped here. Sergei grunted, planting his boots and straining against the handle. With a metallic groan, the hatch gave way, swinging open to reveal a narrow chamber beyond. It was colder here. My visor fogged briefly before the suit compensated. The walls weren't smooth metal anymore, but layered with that branching frost. Thicker, almost fibrous. I reached out with my glove, brushing it. It wasn't ice. It was soft, like touching cartilage. Lena whispered, "It's growing." We moved inside. The chamber stretched longer than the schematics suggested, corridors branching where none should exist. Soviet modules were utilitarian, functional, limited by design. But this was different. The deeper we went, the less it felt engineered, and the more it felt organic, as though the station had been grafted with something alive. In the center of the chamber, a spherical object hovered within a web of faintly glowing filaments. It spun slowly, suspended, humming in a pitch that made my molars ache. The sphere's surface was mirrored, reflecting our helmet lights in warped, distorted images. My own reflection grinned back at me, teeth too sharp, eyes too wide. Miller stepped closer, weapon drawn. "What the hell is that? Some kind of reactor?" "Reactor?" Lena shook her head. "No reactor hums like this. It's biological resonance. It's vibrating at a cellular frequency." Sergei shot her a look. "Speak plain." She swallowed. "It's alive." The hum intensified. I felt it in my chest, rattling through bone. The filaments quivered, then lashed outward, brushing across the bulkhead with a sound like nails on glass. Miller stumbled back, raising his weapon. "I don't like this. We need to go. Now." But before Sergei could answer, the monitors on the chamber wall flickered to life. They weren't showing us anymore. They showed another crew, cosmonauts in older suits, standing in the same chamber, staring at the same sphere. Their visors were cracked. Their eyes were gone. Black fluid trickled from their mouths as they reached out toward the sphere. Lena screamed. The sound cut through my comms, raw and human in a way nothing else had been so far. I turned, instinctively raising my arm as though I could shield myself from the sight. When I looked back, the footage was gone. Only static remained. Sergei's jaw tightened. "We keep moving. Whatever this is, it's why we're here." Reluctantly, we circled the sphere, careful not to let the filaments touch us. At the far side of the chamber, another hatch waited, but etched into its surface were words in Russian, carved deep, as though clawed in desperation. "Ne otkrovайте." "Do not open." Miller's voice was ragged. "We're done. This is beyond contract, beyond salvage. We're not supposed to be here." I wanted to agree. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to retreat, but Sergei's hand was already on the wheel, knuckles white as he forced it to turn. The hatch gave way, releasing a breath of air that smelled wrong, like scorched metal mixed with rot. The corridor beyond wasn't part of any station I'd ever seen. Its walls were smooth, curving, without seams or bolts. They breathed faintly, as though the passage itself inhaled. The crystalline veins were denser here, glowing brighter, pulsing faster, like blood racing through arteries. We stepped inside. Behind us, the hatch slammed shut on its own. The sound reverberated through the corridor, sealing us in. My stomach dropped as I realized the prints on the frost hadn't been leading deeper into MIR-13. They'd been leading out, and whatever left them might still be with us. The corridor seemed endless, twisting in ways that defied logic. My sense of direction slipped, and I realized with a cold shiver that we might already be moving in circles. The walls rose and fell with shallow breaths, expanding just enough to make me feel like we were walking through the ribs of something alive. Each step sank slightly, the floor soft but resilient, rebounding after we lifted our boots. "Stations don't breathe," Miller muttered, his voice stripped of confidence. He was gripping his weapon too tight, his knuckles stark white inside the gloves. "This isn't Soviet. This isn't even human." Lena kept glancing at her scanner, which flickered with unreadable static. The instruments don't recognize this environment. Every time I try to take a reading, it resets itself. Sergei pushed ahead, his determination rigid. "We find the core. We understand what this place is. Then we leave." But we all knew leaving was already uncertain. The hatch had shut behind us, sealed without a sound, and none of us dared look back. If the station had the power to close doors on its own, it could easily decide never to open them again. The passage widened unexpectedly, opening into a circular chamber. Its walls were latticed with crystalline structures that pulsed in rhythm, like 1,000 beating hearts synchronized in a dreadful unity. In the center floated something vast, suspended in strands of light so thin they seemed woven from air itself. A figure, not quite solid, not quite shadow. It stretched tall, segmented, its surface shifting like liquid metal trying to take a shape it couldn't fully hold. For a moment, its form echoed a man in a cosmonaut suit, visor gleaming with reflected stars. Then it warped, limbs elongating, torso bending in ways that bent the eye before collapsing into something insect-like. Lena gasped. "It's trying to mirror us." The figure tilted its head as if it had heard. Then, without sound, it vanished. The chamber dimmed, the crystalline veins darkening, pulsing erratically. I spun, searching, but the figure was gone. "We keep moving," Sergei said, though his voice was low, hollow. "Don't break formation." We pressed on through another tunnel, each bend dragging us deeper into the unknown. At one junction, faint voices bled through the comms. Russian. Familiar words but distorted, stretched as though spoken underwater. My stomach clenched as I recognized one of the voices. It was Sergei's. His own voice, repeating fragments of phrases he hadn't yet spoken. He froze when he heard it too. "That's not me." The air thickened. I felt pressure building inside my helmet, as if the very atmosphere resisted our presence. Then ahead, the corridor split. To the left, dim light flickered as if machinery still functioned. To the right, faint impressions glimmered on the walls. Human faces pressed into the surface, eyes closed, mouths open in silent screams. Their features shifted as we drew closer, eyelids twitching as though they might open any moment. "We don't go that way," Miller said immediately. "I don't care what Sergei says." For once, Sergei didn't argue. He turned left. The passage brought us to another chamber, this one lined with consoles. But the equipment was alien. It had the vague outline of Soviet panels, dials and levers, yet none of it made sense. Symbols etched into the controls pulsed with faint light, rearranging when we stared too long. Lena reached out instinctively, but Sergei snapped, "Don't touch it!" Too late. Her gloved fingers brushed one of the symbols, and the chamber awoke. The walls lit up with swirling constellations, stars aligning into impossible geometries. For an instant, I glimpsed Earth, our planet distorted, stretched into spirals, oceans pouring into the void as though space itself were feeding on it. Then the vision shattered, leaving us standing in the chamber, hearts pounding. Lena staggered back. It showed me the future, or something wearing the future's skin. Before we could respond, the figure appeared again. Not across the room this time, but between us, rising like smoke solidifying into bone. Its head tilted, its mirrored surface reflecting our faces back at us. Then it spoke, or rather, it made our comms vibrate with sound, layered voices spilling over each other. Some were Russian, others English, and one was Miller's own voice whispering, "You shouldn't have come." Miller fired. The shot rang in the confined space, a flash searing across the figure. For a heartbeat, it split into shards of light, but those shards pulled back together, reforming, stronger, more defined. It leaned closer, and where its face should have been, I saw my own reflection grinning at me. The chamber lights flared, the crystalline veins bursting into a furious glow. The floor rippled beneath our boots, as if the whole station had been jolted awake. And in that violent surge, I understood the truth with horrifying clarity. MIR-13 wasn't built to house humans. It was built to contain this thing. And now, after decades of silence, we had set it free. The moment Sergei's scream faded into the distance, the rest of us stood frozen in the lab. The console lights cast harsh red glows against the frost-covered walls, and I could feel the vibration of the entity's movement reverberating through the station's frame. My pulse hammered so loudly in my ears, I almost missed Lena whispering my name, her voice trembling. Miller gripped his weapon tighter, though his eyes betrayed the same fear clawing at my gut. We didn't argue about where to go next. The path Sergei had been dragged toward was alive with shifting shadows, so we staggered in the opposite direction, magnetic boots clanging against the steel flooring. Every corridor seemed to warp as we moved, as if the geometry itself was bending. Angles looked wrong. Hallways seemed longer or shorter depending on how long I stared. It was as though the station no longer wanted to be understood. The crystalline frost now crawled across the ceiling, stretching like spiderwebs, pulsating with faint glimmers that almost resembled stars. Lena muttered equations under her breath, frantic, as though clinging to math could keep her sane. I tried to focus on the sound of our breathing, the crunch of our boots, anything real. The hum that had once been mechanical now carried a rhythm, like a heartbeat syncing with our own. We reached a junction where the floor panels sagged inward. Gravity shifted abruptly, dragging us down in an angle that should not have existed. Miller cursed as his helmet slammed into a railing. I grabbed his arm, pulling him upright. "Stay sharp," I hissed. "If we lose control, we're done." A sudden flash of light tore across the corridor ahead, like a camera bulb igniting. When the glare cleared, the walls were gone. In their place stretched a void filled with galaxies, whirling too close and too fast. I blinked hard, heart pounding. The image snapped back to steel corridors, but the afterimage lingered behind my eyelids. We were not seeing hallucinations. The station was tearing through layers of reality itself. "Portal," Lena gasped. "It's not just coordinates. It's cutting through dimensions." Before I could answer, a low groan shuddered through the bulkheads. Panels split open, spewing clouds of frost that curled into shapes almost human. They hung in the air like phantoms, then dissolved when Miller swung his arm through one. His laugh was shaky, strained. Just tricks. Just tricks of the light. But the prints left behind on the frost said otherwise. They were footprints. Different sizes, some impossibly long. None matched ours. We stumbled into what must have been the main control hub. Consoles still glowed, casting a sterile light over the room. At the center sat a cylindrical chamber wrapped in cables, pulsating faintly like an artificial heart. The unstable wormhole generator. Up close, it was worse than I'd imagined. Segments of its casing were shifting independently, never aligning, as though they existed in slightly different times. Every second, it threatened to tear itself apart. Lena rushed forward, hands trembling over the controls. If this keeps running, it'll destabilize Earth's orbit. Or worse. We have to shut it down. "Can you?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She bit her lip, eyes scanning incomprehensible readouts. "I can try." Miller pressed himself against the wall, eyes darting toward every shadow. "Hurry the hell up. That thing's close. I can feel it watching." And then, as if summoned by his words, the entity slid into view at the far end of the chamber. Its form shifted constantly, segments rearranging, limbs unfurling, eyes that weren't eyes blinking open across its surface. The air temperature plummeted, My visor fogged instantly. Lena's fingers danced across the panel. Sparks erupted, alarms wailed, and the entire chamber shuddered violently. The generator shrieked with energy, arcs of light clawing at the walls like lightning made solid. Reality fractured around us. For a heartbeat, I saw the lab split open to reveal an ocean of stars swirling in impossible patterns, each one pulsing like a neuron in some vast brain. The creature recoiled, shrieking in silence, its segmented body writhing as the surge of power struck it. But the victory was short. The frost on the walls pulsed violently, slithering toward us, seeking oxygen, seeking life. Miller fired his weapon, bullets sparking uselessly against steel and frost alike. The sound echoed like gunfire inside a cathedral. "Now!" Lena screamed. "It's destabilizing!" We grabbed her arms, dragging her back as the chamber cracked open, spilling pure white light into the room. The hum had become a roar. The floor lurched, tearing upward, and suddenly gravity vanished. We floated helplessly as shards of equipment spun around us, sucked toward the growing rift at the center of the machine. The entity stretched its limbs toward the rift, as if trying to escape through it. The sight froze me, because I realized it wasn't running. It was calling, summoning something larger, something still waiting beyond the thin veil of reality. Lena's voice shook. "If it opens fully, it won't just be us. It'll swallow everything." The generator's scream hit a pitch so sharp I thought my skull would split. I clawed at the nearest railing, forcing myself to think. We couldn't outrun it. We couldn't kill it. The only chance was to overload the machine and hope it collapsed in on itself before the rift spread any further. Miller's eyes locked with mine. He understood. He nodded once, jaw set. "Do it," he said. "Blow the damn thing." I took a deep breath, knowing full well what it meant. There would be no going back. Not for us. Not for MIR-13. The controls floated within reach, glowing faintly as if they were waiting for me to choose. And so I reached out and pressed down. The instant my hand hit the control, the chamber erupted with light. A wave of heat washed through the station, making my visor flare white. For a moment I thought I had been vaporized. But then the glow dimmed, and I realized I was still there, floating in weightless chaos. Panels snapped loose, sparks burst like fireworks, and the entire hull groaned under the strain of something far larger than any of us. The rift widened anyway. It wasn't closing as Lena had hoped. Instead, it pulsed like a living wound in the heart of the station. Through it, I glimpsed shifting shapes, massive silhouettes moving in slow arcs. They weren't stars. They weren't galaxies. They were eyes. Eyes so vast they made me feel smaller than an insect. Each one seemed to notice us, and then turn away again, like we were nothing more than dust caught in their vision. Lena screamed at the controls, slamming her fists against them, as if sheer will could rewrite physics. Miller braced himself against the wall, his weapon forgotten, his eyes locked on the growing chasm in space. "It's not stopping," he whispered. "You said it would stop." "It should have," Lena shouted back, her voice cracking. "It should have burned out. It should have..." The rest of her sentence drowned in the roar as the generator tore free from its housing. It spun slowly in midair, cables snapping like veins ripped from flesh, and was sucked deeper into the rift. The station tilted with it. Gravity returned suddenly, flinging us against the bulkheads. My shoulder cracked hard into the wall, pain blinding me for a second. When I opened my eyes again, I saw the entity clinging to the rim of the rift. Segmented limbs dug into the station's steel, anchoring itself as the void dragged it outward. It wasn't resisting anymore. It was guiding the tear, shaping it, controlling the flow. The frost spread in thick veins around its body, as though the entire station was becoming an extension of it. Miller pushed off, stumbling toward Lena. He grabbed her wrist. "If we can't close it, maybe we can ride it. Get the hell out before it takes Earth with it." She stared at him, eyes wide with terror. "We don't know where it leads. It could be anywhere. It could be nowhere." "Better nowhere than watching our planet burn," he snapped. The deck beneath us groaned again. I looked toward the docking module, realizing the clamps holding our ship, the Peregrine, had come loose. For a breathless instant, I thought we had a chance. We could detach, push clear, escape. But then the hull split. Steel peeled like paper, exposing the black beyond. Our ship was gone, swallowed already into the rift. Hopelessness clawed at me, but Lena's frantic hands pulled me back. She shoved a data core into my grip, the size of a fist, its surface still warm from the console. "Take this," she said. "If one of us makes it out, this tells the truth. This proves what happened here." Miller snarled. "Truth won't matter if no one survives." The rift pulsed again, larger, wider, hungrier. I could see the earth below, distorted like a reflection on broken glass. The station was no longer in stable orbit. We were being pulled away, dragged into that impossible wound in space. I felt my body tremble, not from fear alone, but from the sheer weight of what I was seeing. Creation itself bending, unraveling, remaking. The entity let go at last. It drifted into the rift willingly, its segmented form twisting into new shapes as it vanished beyond sight. The frost followed, crawling from the walls, pulling itself loose in streams of glowing particles that swam into the void like fish returning to an ocean. The station screamed around us, metal tearing apart. We had seconds at most. Miller shoved Lena toward the emergency capsule docked at the far end of the corridor. The capsule was old, built for two at most, but it was intact. "Move!" he shouted. "This is our only chance." We stumbled inside, alarms shrieking, hull shuddering around us. Miller jammed the hatch closed, hands shaking as he triggered the launch sequence. The pod rattled violently, then detached with a metallic shriek. For an instant, we were free of the station. I looked back through the tiny viewport, just in time to see Mir 13 collapse entirely, folding inward like a crumpled tin can before being swallowed by the rift. The pod spun uncontrollably, stars and earth twisting in dizzying arcs. Lena clung to the seat restraints, sobbing quietly. Miller kept one hand braced against the control panel, muttering prayers under his breath. I held the data core tight against my chest, as though it were the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. And then, silence. The pod stabilized. The stars outside were not the ones I knew. Constellations twisted into unrecognizable patterns, Earth nowhere in sight. A pale sphere hung in the distance, cracked with glowing fissures, like a shattered pearl. We were somewhere else. Maybe another system. Maybe another universe. Miller exhaled, a hollow laugh escaping him. "We made it. We're alive." But Lena shook her head, staring out the viewport. Her voice was faint, nearly lost in the static of failing comms. "No, we're not alive. We're trapped. We're in its world now." Her words lingered in the pod's stale air. I couldn't argue. The stars outside shifted again, as if something vast had moved between them. My grip tightened on the core. I thought of Earth, of everyone who would never know what had been above them, waiting to be found. The pod drifted silently into the unknown. Behind us, the rift sealed with a final flash, leaving no sign of Mir 13, no sign of our world, nothing but endless dark. And ahead, something stirred, something vast, patient, and aware. I don't know if anyone will ever hear this, but if they do, know this. Space is not empty. It never was. It's alive, and it's waiting for us.